With what happened at VidCon recently between Sargon and Anita, I think I've finally been able to really figure out a problem I've been seeing with the Skeptic community for a while now. I've been watching a bunch of different Skeptic YouTubers and their videos like Bearing, Blair White, Sargon, etc., and others for a while now, and I've kind of had mixed feelings about the entire genre. There's a real push for dialogue and discussion of topics that would otherwise have a one-sided argument. Had there not been a skeptical counter-push to Gamergate, we'd probably not have fun video games anymore. We'd be Australia. But the skeptic community has kind of existed only as a counterculture. And that means if there's nothing to fight, the culture doesn't exist. And this means an eternal culture war. Now, I want to be clear, and this will be important later, I don't think the skeptics behind the culture war are doing this out of malice or greed, though a couple may be, and possibly all of them could be influenced by that, who knows. But the idea of the culture war itself makes the culture war eternal, and any culture that engages in it does so by adopting the war as a part of the culture. Now, I did say any culture war, and so this problem extends far beyond the skeptic community, but skeptics seem to be the best example of how this war mentality is awful. Take Sargon, for example. A while ago, he put out a video called Tim Sort Did Nothing Wrong. Now, I agree with pretty much all of his video until the end, where he went after Jim Sterling for seemingly no reason. Not just going after Jim or any hypocrisy, but going so far as to allege that he is a part of a cabal with Zoe Quinn and Anita Sarkeesian, trying to push for the suppression of others in gaming. He backs up his claim by saying that Jim put his money into a game that Zoe Quinn is working on, that Jim tacitly agreed with a rather funny and impassioned speech by Adam Sessler, that he went after a game called Tranny Gladiator, that Jim leans a bit social justice, but this is proof that Jim is a hypocrite who wants to suppress others. Let's look at all of these. First, Jim did back a game that Zoe Quinn is working on. However, this is not Zoe Quinn's game. This is Chuck Tingle's game. Who's Chuck Tingle? He's an erotic gay novelist. A gay erotic novelist? Novelist of erotic gayness? The point is, he writes what is possibly a joke, but definitely a bunch of gay porn, often including dinosaurs, unicorns, and apparently fidget spinners. But I just read the Wikipedia page, not the books. Now, to be fair, he did seem to know Zoe Quinn before deciding to make the game, but even in the tweet Sargon shows, Jim is clearly backing Chuck Tingle, not Zoe Quinn. Why would Jim back Chuck Tingle? Well, Jim is an openly bi individual, so if this is something he likes and wants to see get made with his voice in the game, why not back it with his money? He works in the game industry. He makes his money talking about games. He has a chance to fund a game that he wants to see made and be a part of it. But next is the speech Adam Sessler gave. Yes, Jim sat there and didn't say that he disagreed and thought that harassment was wrong in the part of the video that's shown. However, Jim has gone out of his way on numerous occasions, especially after when his fans harass people, to condemn the harassment and remind them that it's wrong. Now, if Sargon was held to his own standard here, that would mean Thunderfoot's earlier criticism about Sargon and his involvement in the live stream about Russian Deadpool should be valid. Clearly, an individual cannot even be around others who may make comedic statements no matter how they advocate for the opposite. Sargon tries to push the claim further by saying that Jim went after a game called Tranny Gladiator. For context, Jim does a series where he finds the worst games on Steam Greenlight and shits all over them, in the hopes of keeping lazy and what seem to be obvious cash grabs off of Steam. Now, according to Sargon, this attack was seemingly intended to get his fans to harass the developer of the game. What Sargon doesn't show is a tweet from Jim Sterling, the follow-up video he made where Jim calls out and denounces his fans for harassing the developer. If Sargon was held to his own standard, it would not matter every single time Sargon has denounced his fans. Now, why would Jim go after Training Gladiator if he didn't want the developer to get harassed? Like I said earlier, he has a series where he does stuff like this. He's engaged in a culture war against games that look like they are cheap and incomplete and often are money-grabbing schemes. Now, in his video, Jim even admits that the creator of the game may be genuine in their feelings towards it and that it might not be just a shock value game. But he still goes on to criticize it and criticize it fairly, and Sargon leaves all that out. Sargon seems to be working from the assumption that Jim is malicious, and then working to find evidence to prove that, rather than representing Jim fairly. The only reason I can think of for that isn't that Sargon is a hypocritical sociopath, is that Sargon, like a lot of other people, is engaged in a culture war and sees the enemy where there is none. This right here is the problem with the Skeptic community and a lot of YouTube. It's not that people don't have valid things to say, it's that just about everyone manages to immediately undermine it by taking things way too far. Sargon had no need to go after Jim Sterling, yet did so because there was a perceived need. The culture war demanded Sargon fight back, and so he went after the next monster he saw. But if you take a step back, it's obvious he's being a complete hypocrite here, especially if you look at his videos on Thunderfoot again. Sargon started going after people he didn't really know, and started trying to give his take on events he didn't really understand, and so he pushed the narrative of his agenda instead of the facts, and misrepresented Jim in the process. I don't think this was purposeful on Sargon's part, or that he was trying to be malicious, but I do think that he has hunted monsters for far too long. The sort of feminism that Anita Sarkeesian pushes is the exact same way. It exists to fight the patriarchy, so any problems that come up must be from the patriarchy, as the culture war is all-consuming of the individual's life. Only if a problem is clearly not a part of the culture war is it not a part of the culture war. So when Anita started getting harassment from all over, all of it would be seen as coming from the enemy, the anti-feminists, Sargon, and the rest. And this sort of culture needs to stop. Now, the culture war forces people to assume the worst in each other, or we should be giving each other the benefit of the doubt instead. This is what leads people like Sargon to not do their research before attacking someone, or people like Anita to assume that all attacks being made are directed by a couple malicious individuals. The worst has already been assumed. Everything else is just proof. And this is a problem that needs to get addressed honestly. The culture on the internet is absolute crap. It is terrible. At best, you have individuals that undermine their own points by making rather baseless accusation against others due to a war mentality. And at worst, you have a couple people who are genuine sociopaths trying to keep it going. However, we all need to admit that a culture war that promotes mocking and insulting the enemy, even when that enemy is actually right, and even when that enemy is not your enemy, is a terrible culture. Mockery is fine. Calling out stupid ideas is fine. Calling out people that are sociopaths isn't just fine, but necessary. But when it gets taken too far, communications get strained. And when it gets taken too far and the person taking it too far is wrong, communication gets killed. I just want to reiterate, I really don't think most people on all the different sides of the debate, whether they are right or wrong, whether they are unwittingly acting hypocritically or like bullies, are bad people. In fact, given the mistakes I've seen a lot of these YouTubers make, I can say I'm pretty sure most of them are regular people, because these are the types of mistakes regular people make. Our technology outgrew our evolution, and we are stuck with our tribal instincts while living in a massive world. But if you want to talk about how others are acting, if you want to be engaged in the discussion of ideas, make sure you don't act in a way that you don't want others to be.